People in our own backyards are hurting. There are insecurities around food, economics, mental health, access to justice, healthcare, and our society continues to become more divisive. But there is hope. Right here in Chicagoland, there are people and organizations who are on the front lines, working to bring about positive and transformative change. Each week, we're going to meet some of these agents of change and examine how they are spurring innovative ideas and finding solutions to push our society forward in a more just direction. I'm Sufyan Sohel, and this is Change Agents. Good evening. There may be no clearer example of wealth inequity than those shown in Chicago and Cook County. Many households in Northwest Cook County hold over $1 million in wealth, while just a few miles away, a quarter of households have a negative wealth of $1,500 or less. The Urban Institute estimates that a typical household's wealth in the richest areas of Chicago and Cook County is 206 times higher than a typical household's wealth in the poorest areas. For many Chicagoans, the pandemic exacerbated the challenges that they were already facing, like lack of access to stable housing, food, childcare, and a continuing source of income. The Chicago Department of Public Health, through surveys to gain the insights into how Chicagoans' lives were affected by COVID-19 and related social upheavals, found that 27% of Latinx residents and 26% of Black residents reported missing urgent medical appointments. 55% of Latinx Chicagoans and 51% of Black Chicagoans experienced a reduction of income. 59% of Black Chicagoans and 50% of Latinx Chicagoans held jobs requiring them to work in person during the height of the pandemic, at a time when vaccines were still unavailable. 37% of Black residents and 34% of Latinx residents put off paying for food. COVID-19 has taken a terrible toll on the health and well-being of our city's residents, especially those who are Black and Latinx. Without formally acknowledging this detrimental impact and its roots in structural racism, we will never be able to move forward as a city. To help me dig deeper into this a little bit more, I am pleased to welcome the resident Imam and chairperson of the Board of Directors of Masjid Al-Taqwa in South Chicago, Imam Tariq El-Amin. Imam, thank you so much for joining me tonight.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Imam means spiritual leader.
Yes.
Could you tell a little bit more about your role in your mosque and your community?
So similar to the minister or rabbi, the imam serves a similar function of providing spiritual care, spiritual direction. In addition to that, as the chair of the board, I'm also responsible for organizational development, growth, coordinating the services that we provide, working with the other leaders within the masjid, the board of directors, volunteers, to make sure that we are living out our faith.
We'll get to your faith in a little bit, because it's an important conversation of what we're talking about. But before that, what are you seeing in the community? You know, I just gave some statistics about wealth gap in Chicago and how COVID-19 has really impacted several communities, especially Latinx and Black communities in Chicago. What are you seeing in the neighborhoods around your mosque?
Yeah, those are some really impressive statistics, and they paint a very picture of need. I think you said the number's like 26%. So what we're seeing, the community that we're in, it is a working community, and you know, you have there's some valleys, you know, and lows, so to speak. But I would say that there is a fair amount of need in that community. I wouldn't paint it necessarily as a lower socioeconomic status community, but there's certainly need that's been present, and that fortunately we've been able to do our part in addressing some of that need. Food insecurity has been one of them, economic insecurity, and you know, I don't want to go too far off, you know, off script, so to speak, but events like the ComEd giving out, you know, gift certificates, you know, people can apply towards their bills, just, you know, went extremely quickly. Anytime we're doing food giveaways or clothing giveaways, uh, what we've seen is that it's not just also a need, but there's also a community that is in communication. So one person will come by and they'll get some food or they'll get a coat, and then three or four other people come because they've been contacted. They've gone, they've told a neighbor, they've told family members. So there's need, and there's also a sense of community and connection that I've been able to witness.
So one person's receiving something, they're sharing the word with others,
Yeah.
and you're able to meet that need.
Yes, to the best of our ability.
That's wonderful. And we're going to get back to that in a couple seconds too. But I just want to hit on one point is, I recently read an article that WTTW and Southside Weekly created a map which showed how Chicago's populations morphed between 1930 and 2020. But they didn't really change. The population didn't really change. And they argued, both WTTW and Southside Weekly, that this was due to the barriers created by city leaders who were determined to keep Black, Latinx, and white Chicagoans from living, working, and playing together in the same neighborhoods. Do you see this evidence of segregation in Chicago?
Definitely. Chicago is referred to as a city of neighborhoods, and a lot of folks look at that simply as code for a segregated city. And while there's a lot of beauty in these neighborhoods, when there is no connection, there's no cooperation, it leads to inequality. It leads to not having the benefit of us not being able to benefit one another. The idea of trade, and trade is not always economic, but trade is in culture, it's in our sentiments, it's intellectual. So when people don't get that opportunity, we wind up revisiting and recreating scenarios that we've seen in the past, where but working class Black folks and white folks in the South, farmers, sharecroppers, when they tried to come together politically, it was met with not just violent resistance, but also subversion, to maintain the status quo. And we've seen that that's unfortunately a part of Chicago's history, where the folks who came here as a part of the quote unquote Great Migration, who were actually refugees, were not met with the same sensitivity that a lot of refugees are met with today, in providing social services and providing, undergirding their social mobility, acclimating them to a new space. But instead, we're met with, revulsion. We're met with a withdrawal of social services. We're met with, over policing. So yeah, unfortunately, that's a part of the history that we have, and we can't airbrush that and move it out the way.
Oh, absolutely, and thank you for sharing that insight. Let's go back now to Bridging the Gap, an initiative by your mosque, and tell us a little bit about that and how your faith inspires that great work.
Okay, so one of and this is certainly not exclusive to Islam. This is something found in pretty much just about every faith tradition, the idea of charity, and certainly within the Abrahamic faiths.
Sure.
So in Islam, we have this idea of the pillar of zakat, and this charity and sadaqah, which is unrestricted. It's just giving wherever it is needed. So Bridging the Gap is actually a nonprofit started by myself and my wife, Dr. El-Amin, and we were partnering with Mesh Al-Taq. Well, this actually predates my being elected as the Imam.
Okay.
But they've been kind of synonymous, right?
Yeah.
So, and I don't have any problem with that at all. But it was really about instilling or giving opportunities, particularly for our young people, education and leadership and service. Those were the core components of that. And one of the idea of service, it aligned with the lunch pad that we started, which was lunch preparation and distribution, clothing giveaways. We used to take our students to a community garden, which is no more, unfortunately, but they got a chance to plant. They got a chance to help and prepare. But that has continued even after I became imam. I've been imam now it'll be 10 years next year. So we continue doing those and have actually expanded our efforts. And it's really just a reflection of us understanding that we have a responsibility of stewardship, We have a responsibility of giving, not just giving back, but the giving that is really you're giving to yourself. It's probably one of the most selfish things that a person can do.
No, absolutely.
Just to engage in consistent service. So we keep those and many other efforts going with the intent of, like I said, of living out our faith.
I love it. Imam Tariq, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for all the amazing work that both you, your mosque, Bridging the Gap is doing. And I wish you all the best of luck.
Thank you so much.
We'll be right back with Todd Belcore, the Executive Director of Social Change.
Michael Charles has got the blues. I am honored to sit here with this gentleman, 10-time Grammy-elected legend of blues, Michael Charles. He is joining me and you on the next episode of In the Arena.
Welcome back to Change Agents. My next guest is Todd Belcore, Executive Director of Social Change. Todd, welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Todd, Social Change, your mission is to amplify community voices through storytelling, organizing, and direct actions. Throughout the pandemic, I saw the work you were doing, food handouts, PPP handouts, diapers, you name it, throughout the communities. What are some of the things that you saw, and who are the communities most impacted?
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to join you on this show and be with you and your audience. At the end of the day, we're committed to liberation at Social Change. And that really comes through three pillars, which you've already mentioned. We have our international film festivals. We have to tell stories. We have to make sure what people are dealing with is actually being reflected and heard by people who aren't otherwise hearing it. So we have our international film festival to showcase films, get more people to hear it and listen. But when you hear it and listen, what are you going to do once you hear it? Are you going to ignore it, or are you going to do something about it? So that's what brings us to the direct service opportunities that you mentioned in terms of being on the community, being on the front lines, and making sure we're responding to the needs we know are existing and are exacerbated by things like the pandemic. So things like hunger, how are we getting food to people? Things like access to healthcare, how are we making sure people are getting everything from vaccines to preventative screenings, and legal assistance. People still are at these turning points where they've got albatrosses around their neck because of criminal histories and other impediments. And what can we do to provide pop-up services right in their backyards to make sure we're responding to those urgent needs? And that's just not enough even of itself. So while we've given out almost 1 million pounds of food, while we've given thousands of people vaccines and legal assistance, what are we doing to address these root causes, these systemic causes responsible for reducing this need and making this significant issue of both discrimination, segregation, racism also prevalent? What we're seeing out here throughout the nation, though, however, is the people who are poor, the people who are more marginalized are people with more melanin, and it's not a coincidence. Brother El-Amin talked about segregation in the prior segment, and that's not just an issue in Chicago. Unfortunately, it's an issue all throughout the nation. And that segregation is overlaid neatly with issues of food deserts, with opportunity deserts, with education deserts, healthcare deserts. So that's why, in addition to the things we provide, we make sure we provide it in people's actual backyards. So people who are deprived opportunity have those resources and the saturation of those resources brought to them like they have in rich communities across the nation.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that. In the pandemic, I know you had many events with direct services. I know you, with handouts, there was legal clinics. Did you pick certain communities based on geography or demographics? What was your thought behind that?
Yeah, nothing's done without at least some scientific backing. So of course we see what's going on, but we also look at the numbers in terms of what the census is bearing out in terms of poverty and the intensity of poverty in communities, and making sure that every event that we host is directly adjacent or within a community that's experiencing such poverty. Because the whole point is we recognize that transportation deserts are real, that not everyone has a car and everyone has the ability to get from A to B. So what can we do to make sure our events are accessible? Not just available, but actually accessible, so people can come and get everything they need and tell their friends and neighbors to do the same. And worst case scenario, we also did quite a bit of delivering too. So even if you have something a half a mile away, some people are bedridden, some people are elders and aren't able to get to and from. So we made sure that we had a really vibrant network of organizations and leaders and senior home leaders and organizers to let us know which of our elders, which of our family members, which are our extended family members are in need, and how can we meet that need even if they aren't able to make it to where we're at. So Yes, we had a chance to really provide some meaningful services, but we directed it always to where the places are impacted most.
Thank you, and thank you so much for that work. You mentioned some legislative advocacy work that you've been doing. Recently, I've been seeing a lot of articles that Chicago is becoming the purge city. Can you tell a little bit about where that headline's coming from in terms of the cash bail legislation that passed and what the reality is in terms of who's affected by these new policies?
Yeah, the reality is there's never been a time in Chicago's history where it's been perfect as the way it treats its community members, as it treats people who have made mistakes in their past or however.
Sure.
And what we've been doing as advocates of social change and also other organizations doing really outstanding work is fighting just to right the wrongs of the past. So removing the checkbox of have you ever been convicted of a crime on applications and expanding remedies like sealing and expungement to make sure more people can have limit who looks at old records so they can be judged on who they are versus who they were. But also making sure newer remedies like certificates of good conduct are available and make sure people aren't just wasting away in jail, deprived their opportunity to spend time with their family, deprived their opportunity to work, and all the things we know are part and parcel to keeping families together unless it's absolutely necessary. And right now, people are just nervous because they haven't seen a world that exists like this, where we actually listen to cases on their merits and make decisions based on them versus just lumping people together based on activities without looking into the facts themselves. So there is going to be a little consternation. You're already hearing a lot of it. But at the end of the day, we're confident in terms of how it's meted out, but also the necessity of it. That's actually going to make families stronger and communities stronger as well.
Thank you for that. But are certain communities more highly impacted by some of these policies and rules than others?
Yes, so on both sides. So at the end of the day, I know that our Black and brown brothers are going to be more likely to be profiled, more likely to be arrested, more likely to be convicted. I also know we're also more likely to be victims of crime as well. So, being a kid from the South Side, having family members who live almost entirely in the South Side, my mom raised my siblings in the projects in Chicago. I understand that crime is something that we're more likely to experience and endure. So there is more risk to saying more people will be released. I understand that, I live that. But I also know what happens unless we don't provide real meaningful pathways for people to turn their lives around, who demonstrate the aptitude and the interest to do so, it's always going to get worse. And especially we're talking about an economy where the inflation has made it impossible for hourly earners to really do anything to provide for themselves and their families. We need to make sure we keep families together as long as possible and whenever possible. And this is just another extension of that.
So am I at more risk now if we're going to loosen some of these policies and strengthen some of these policies in some ways that we're ignoring some of the past history of some of these individuals?
What puts us at risk is poverty. What puts us at risk is deprivation of opportunity. And that's omnipresent. So we're working to address that simultaneously. What leads to crime is that deprivation. So at the end of the day, yes, people will be released, but people who are not considered a risk to society. So the laws themselves don't put us at risk. As it relates to cash bail, as it relates to some of the things we've done to extend detainee rights, make sure people can actually get access to counsel in a swift manner and things like that. What puts us in danger are the irresponsible policies that make it difficult or impossible for people to raise their families, put food on the table, and do all the things we know are necessary for not just thriving, but just basic survival. And that's what lends itself to criminal activity. So it's not the advent of these laws that are going to lead to the public safety concerns we've had. They're actually long-standing public safety concerns that are slowly being addressed by this mayor and others. But I think people are just misassigning their concern because they just see the headlines of, we're releasing people out of jail without recognizing the circumstances leading up into it.
So I don't have to worry about the purge.
No purge in Chicago for sure.
Todd, you seem like a very intelligent person. You're a lawyer by education. There's so many things you could have done with your time, with your life. Why this? Why have you dedicated your life to social change?
No, I appreciate that. The almost compliment my intelligence. Everything's like, you seem smart. No, I love Sufyan.
You are.
I'm being silly. My mom, I mentioned kind of briefly that my mom raised my siblings in the projects at Dearborn Homes right there in 26th and State. And I saw her as a single mother raising the four of us, my oldest brother being paraplegic, just deal with immeasurable pain and discrimination and hardship. But I also saw how she triumphed over that and fought to make sure we had basic opportunities just so we could have a chance to succeed. So growing up in the shadow of that and witnessing that and having firsthand experience with it, how could I then, now that she broke through and got me all these opportunities, turn my back on the very same community members, the very same people who are enduring everything that I know all too well. So it's really a tribute to the way she fought for me, the way we fight for others, and just making sure that we're standing in a gap so more people can fulfill the potential like she gave me a chance to.
I love that. And what's like next for social change? I know you're currently in your International Film Festival. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Our International Social Change Festival is amazing. We have over 150 films this year.
Wow.
We received thousands of hours of submissions. So that's like, even with a rigorous process and consideration, over 150 are now available for people to stream, watch from their couch, watch directly after the segment, before this segment, during commercial segments. But we have really, really cool films too. I mean, it's not just all documentaries. We have narratives. We have, we have animated films as well. We have films made by directors right here in Chicago. Muhammad Bilal made a film called Blue Cave, talking about the importance of youth being able to dream, even amidst hardships of violence and lack of opportunity. Another Chicago production called Encounter Inglewood by director Mosley. He highlights 6 artists and activists in Inglewood, all the collaboration and cool work they're doing. We have a film called Invisible Seams, talking about the way in which Asian Americans really are the underpinning of actually putting together the actual clothing that we wear, and the anti-Asian hate that they endure and the immigration things they have to endure. Unguarded, a really cool film about prisons in Brazil.
Oh, wow.
And the way they use restorative justice practices, where the actual prisons themselves are run by prisoners in the community, and the incredible outcomes they have. We have films about all the things that matter, all the things that are taking place, and we need people to see them, because once they see them, you can't unsee them. You'll be inspired. You want to do something. And what makes our festival so different, not only do we have an opportunity for you to see those films from anywhere, and that dynamic, award-winning, inspiring films, but we also have opportunities to get involved in conversations where really cool people who are involved in these issues, you can talk with them directly, be part of the larger conversation. And the most important part of all of that is we have action opportunities too. So you don't just have your inspiration go without, translating to something meaningful. So please check it out. It's going on right now, and it'll be going up until November 12th. And it's changefest2022.eventive.org.
Wonderful. Thank you. I'll definitely check it out.
Thank you.
But you want to inspire people to talk and learn and do action.
Mm-hmm.
But what can people really do, right? It's you and I are in the business of working on social change, social justice issues, but there's so many people who, due to many different circumstances, just aren't able to, spend their time on these issues. They have to, they have other priorities or other focus areas. So what can they do?
Mm-hmm. I think the first thing that people need to realize is they can do more than they ever imagined. And that's simply by just getting a little out of your comfort zone. So with the pandemic, for example, social change was not known for being a food distribution, pop-up farmers market, pop-up health clinic organization. But when we were presented with a challenge, when the community was saying, this is what we need, how can we ignore it? Just like we mentioned earlier, like how can I turn my back what I'm seeing, what I'm hearing, what I'm feeling? That's the importance of the thing like the film festival. You see it and you feel it in a different way, where it really motivates you and compels you to do something. And that something is just anything more than what you've done previously. Don't make this a really difficult hurdle. You don't have to start drafting legislation. You don't have to lead protests on the street and shut down highways or anything like that. All you need to do is a little bit more. If that means going to a volunteer event, that means organizing a watch party for the festival. That means, calling your legislator on behalf of as a proponent of some legislation that we're fighting for. Or if that means just coming to one of our social events and getting to meet more cool people and building your network and getting part of a coalition that's doing some really cool work and building community with love first. All those things are really easy ways to enter the movement that we're trying to foster and curate. And we'd love to have you. We're at Shy Social Change on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. For our older heads, you can email us at todd@socialchange.site. And we need everyone on the front lines. There's no qualification, just basic interest, curiosity, and we'd love to have you.
I love it. And I really appreciate that you're highlighting all of these issues facing so many different communities. And I think it's with the lens that, we're all facing very similar things.
Yeah.
Hate has no boundaries, right? So many different communities. I'm in the anti-hate world based on religion, race, sexual orientation. And if we don't realize what other communities are facing, we can realize we may not be alone in our struggles. And I appreciate you bringing to light all of these issues. My last question for you, and the very most important one, is you have a 1-year-old daughter. If you could tell her something right now about preparing her for the future, or what you wish for her to know about her responsibility to the community, to the world, what would you tell her?
Not having a child until very recently, I didn't realize how much they change your life. I talk about my mom having kids. I can't imagine having 4. I'm just so blessed to have even the one I have, but it's just so much work. And you can't find yourself even loving anything more than the little one that you have in front of you and how much they depend on you and need you. What I'm trying to instill in her, even now, is have a gentle spirit, a kind heart, to give back, even if there's something that we no longer can use, we're giving it to someone else who can use it and need it. So she comes with me on volunteer events. We donate clothes together, donate food together. But I just need her to be a kind soul and to follow her intellectual curiosity and to be a critical thinker. And to recognize that there are people who should never have a chance to meet, who she can really help and transform their lives. And I want her to be better than me in every sense. I'm an older vessel. I'm breaking down. My knees hurt. I'm out here doing the best I can, but I know she'll be much better, bigger, more amazing in every way. And I'm just so proud to be her father and so lucky to be associated with such a cool little girl, such a smart, sweet thing. And I can't wait to see her grow and thrive.
That's so wonderful. And thank you so much for sharing. And we hope you have many years ahead of you in your work, because you're doing some great things.
Thank you.
Thank you, Todd, for joining us. We'll be right back with this week's Change in Action. In this week's Change in Action, meet Sarah Chowdhury, a state employee with tireless passion, a heart of gold, and a commitment to show up. During the pandemic, she volunteered with organizations like Social Change, Black Village Foundation, and Neighborhood Heroes to help hand out face masks, hand sanitizers, food, and other essential supplies to some of our most vulnerable neighbors. She partnered with others in her South Loop neighborhood to collect funds to purchase and deliver food and PPE to struggling families in nearby communities. Recently, with Chicago receiving several refugees from Afghanistan, she collected coats, blankets, and other supplies to distribute to these forced migrants. Sarah immigrated to the United States at a young age and remembers the support she and her family received from families, friends, neighbors, and community institutions when they first arrived. She feels it is her responsibility to give back to others in need, a duty supported by her faith, spirituality, and upbringing. She believes a society can be measured by how it treats its least advantaged and most marginalized communities, and strives to help level the playing field through her service. Sarah also believes that positive change is not limited to one particular skill set, and literally everyone has something to offer. Thank you to Imam Tariq, Todd, and your respective organizations for working to combat inequalities found in our communities and support those most impacted. Thank you to Sarah for showing us positive change through your actions and reminding us that each of us has something to offer, an opportunity to do good for those around us. We can all be change agents. There are so many people doing good around us. Each week, we get 30 minutes to share them with you. I hope you are as inspired as I am to be change agents. Thank you for joining me tonight, and I look forward to seeing you next week.